When you think about the power of surprise and changing dynamics in intimacy, you begin to realize that the real spark is never in routine, but in those moments that catch you off guard and shift the energy completely. Most people fall into habits, doing the same thing over and over, thinking that consistency equals connection, but it's actually the element of unpredictability that heightens desire. Shifting dynamics is about breaking that expectation and allowing a new wave of excitement to take over, where control isn't fixed, it's fluid. And the way you move between those roles determines the level of intensity you create together. When surprise enters the moment, the mind doesn't have time to prepare, and that instant shift is what makes the body respond more deeply, leaving both people overwhelmed in the best way possible. Changing dynamics also means knowing when to step into the lead and when to step back, because intimacy isn't just physical, it's psychological. And the brain processes the act of giving up control as a sign of trust. That's why when one person suddenly takes charge in a way that wasn't expected, it sparks a reaction that's both thrilling and grounding at the same time. It doesn't mean one person dominates everything, it means that balance exists in the exchange. And the surprise is what magnifies the emotional response. People remember those moments not because they were planned, but because they felt spontaneous. And spontaneity has a power that scripted actions can never match. There's also something magnetic about unpredictability because it taps into curiosity, and curiosity fuels passion. When you don't know what's about to happen next, the anticipation builds, and anticipation by itself is already half the excitement. That's why the shift of positions or the sudden change in who controls the pace carry such impact, because it plays with expectation and keeps the experience alive. If everything feels the same, the body adapts and dulls the sensation. But when things shift unexpectedly, the brain resets, the adrenaline kicks in, and the moment becomes unforgettable. Surprise also dismantles overthinking, and that's where true presence comes in. When you're caught off guard in the best way, you stop analyzing, you stop planning, and you stop trying to predict what happens next, and instead, you simply experience. That shift into the present moment is powerful because intimacy thrives in presence, not distraction. A sudden move, a new angle, or a different rhythm has the ability to pull someone out of their thoughts and anchor them into what's happening right now. And that kind of presence amplifies every touch, every glance, every reaction. It's not about doing something extreme, it's about doing something unexpected, because even the smallest change can feel enormous when it comes in a moment of surprise. Something as simple as reversing roles or changing pace halfway through creates a rush of energy that transforms the atmosphere completely. That's why people crave variation. Not because they want more complexity, but because they want the experience to feel alive, and nothing feels more alive than the shock of something new. The body responds to that shock with heightened sensitivity, and that sensitivity is what intensifies every other detail of the connection. The deeper truth is that surprise and shifting dynamics reveal how much both partners are willing to explore together. It shows flexibility, openness, and a willingness to push beyond the ordinary, and those qualities fuel emotional intimacy as much as they fuel physical passion. When both people know they can change roles, experiment with control, and embrace the unexpected without fear, it creates a bond that feels secure yet thrilling at the same time. That balance of safety and surprise is rare, but it's what makes the difference between routine and extraordinary. The real strength of this keynote lies in understanding that surprise is not just a tactic, it's an expression of presence and creativity. It communicates that you're paying attention, that you're not stuck in autopilot, and that you're actively choosing to create moments worth remembering. Shifting dynamics tells your partner that you see them in new ways, that you're not just repeating what's familiar, and that you value the connection enough to keep it alive. That awareness, paired with the willingness to disrupt routine, is what sets apart experiences that fade from those that linger in memory. When you talk about how positioning creates dominance or vulnerability, you're really talking about the hidden language that bodies speak without words. Every angle, every shift, every move carries a message, and it either says, I'm in control or I'm surrendering. That balance is powerful because it changes the way both people experience the moment, and it's why certain positions can completely shift the energy between two people. Dominance is not about force, it's about presence, about stepping into the role of guiding, leading, and setting the pace. And vulnerability is about allowing yourself to be guided, opening up fully, and showing trust in the process. The reason this matters is because the human mind and body crave both sides of that spectrum. And when one moment emphasizes control and another emphasizes surrender, the contrast becomes explosive. Every relationship thrives on this exchange because without dominance, moments feel directionless, and without vulnerability, moments feel incomplete. The beauty is in how positioning allows both to happen naturally, without words, without explanation, just through the way two people connect. One angle puts someone in a position of power, deciding the pace and movement, while another creates a state of openness, giving full access and trust. And together, those roles create a cycle of tension and release. That tension and release are what make experiences memorable, because they keep the energy flowing and they keep both people fully engaged in the experience instead of drifting into routine. It's in those moments of dominance and vulnerability that both people find balance, because both roles are needed and both roles are desired. What makes positioning so impactful is the way it connects to the mind as much as the body. Dominance ignites excitement because it awakens the instinct of being led, and vulnerability deepens the bond because it requires courage to fully let go. When someone steps into a position that makes them feel exposed, they are showing trust in the other person, and that trust turns into a powerful emotional connection. On the other hand, when someone steps into a position of control, they aren't just leading physically, they're creating safety, structure, and direction, which builds confidence in the other person. The constant shift between the two becomes a rhythm that goes beyond movement. It becomes a rhythm of trust and release, and that's where the intensity truly grows. There's also an undeniable psychological layer in this balance. People often carry roles in their daily life where they're expected to always be strong, always be in charge, always hold things together. And when they find themselves in a position of vulnerability, it allows them to drop that weight and experience freedom. In the same way, people who rarely get to lead in their everyday life may find stepping into a dominant role exciting because it unlocks a part of themselves they don't often express. Positioning creates that opportunity, and it's why the balance between dominance and vulnerability feels so essential. Because it doesn't just shift the body, it shifts the identity of the person in that moment. And that makes the experience even more powerful. The strength of this keynote is that dominance and vulnerability are not opposites, they're complements. You cannot have one without the other, and when both are embraced, the connection becomes stronger. One moment of vulnerability makes the next moment of dominance even more meaningful, and one moment of dominance makes the surrender into vulnerability even more impactful. The exchange is what creates depth, and it's the depth that keeps the memory alive long after the moment is gone. Without this balance, the experience risks becoming shallow, but when both roles are explored, the entire interaction becomes layered, textured, and unforgettable. Positioning also teaches that control is never absolute. It's shared, it's fluid, it shifts back and forth in a way that makes both people feel included. That flow is what makes intimacy dynamic, because no one is locked into a single role, and both people get to experience the thrill of leading and the release of following. It's in those shifts that laughter, passion, and connection are born, because both dominance and vulnerability bring something valuable to the table. Without dominance, there is no direction, and without vulnerability, there is no trust. And when those two are combined, the energy becomes unstoppable. That energy doesn't just happen by accident. It's created through awareness, intentionality, and the willingness to embrace both roles fully. The lesson here is that positioning matters because it's more than physical movement. It's communication without words, and it reveals what each person is willing to give and receive. Dominance shows confidence, care, and direction, while vulnerability shows trust, courage, and openness. And together, those elements create the kind of intensity that makes people lose control in the best way. When you understand that positions are not just about mechanics, but about the balance of power and surrender, you begin to realize that what makes them powerful is not just what they look like, but what they represent on a deeper level. When you talk about why eye contact and closeness intensify the moment, you're talking about the difference between physical connection and emotional connection. Anyone can go through the motions, but the real depth comes when you add the layer of presence, and presence is never louder than when you're close enough to look directly into each other's eyes. That closeness strips away distractions, it strips away distance, and it creates a raw intensity that cannot be faked. Eye contact forces honesty, it forces attention, and it pulls both people into the same space where nothing else matters except the moment being shared. It's in that closeness that the body and mind align, and that alignment is what takes the experience from surface level to unforgettable. The human brain is wired to respond to eye contact because it signals connection, vulnerability, and trust. When you look into someone's eyes, it's impossible to hide, and that vulnerability can feel overwhelming in the best possible way. That's why positions that bring two people face to face carry such weight, because they demand presence and they make avoidance impossible. The mind can wander when there's distance, but when faces are inches apart, all focus is pulled into that space, and that intensity amplifies everything else happening in that moment. It's not just about looking, it's about being seen. And that experience of being fully seen is what makes people lose control. Closeness also changes how the body reacts, because when you're that near to someone, every detail becomes heightened. You feel every breath, every heartbeat, every shift of movement, and those tiny details build a rhythm that connects on a deeper level than physical motion alone. The warmth of skin, the softness of touch, the pressure of being held that tightly all send signals to the brain that this is not ordinary, this is something powerful. Proximity magnifies sensation. And when you pair that with eye contact, the experience transforms into something that feels almost overwhelming because the mind and body are completely locked into one another. What's often overlooked is how closeness eliminates the ability to hide behind performance. At a distance, it's easy to mask emotions or stay in your head, but when you're close enough to feel someone breathe, the mask disappears. There's no space for pretending, no space for playing a role, only raw emotion and real presence. That's why this level of closeness is so impactful, because it demands authenticity, and authenticity is rare. When someone looks into your eyes at that level of intensity, it's like they see straight past the surface and connect to who you really are, and that kind of connection creates a depth that lingers far beyond the moment itself. Eye contact and closeness also build anticipation in a way that no other factor can. The simple act of holding a gaze for longer than expected can make time feel like it slows down. And in that slowing down, the body builds a rush of energy waiting to be released. The stillness of closeness creates contrast against the movement that follows, and that contrast is what keeps the experience alive. It's not about rushing or forcing, it's about leaning into the intensity that comes from stillness, from holding, from looking, and from allowing the buildup to happen naturally. That anticipation makes everything that follows feel 10 times more powerful. There's a reason why people describe closeness as overwhelming, because it activates both the emotional and physical sides of connection at the same time. The heart races not just from physical contact, but from the intimacy of being fully seen and fully felt. The brain cannot separate those two experiences, so they blend together, creating an intensity that feels almost too much to handle, and that's exactly what makes it unforgettable. It's not about complexity, it's about depth, and closeness delivers depth in a way nothing else can. The beauty of this keynote is that eye contact and closeness are simple, but they're powerful because they cut through everything else and go straight to the core of human connection. They remind you that intimacy isn't just about what you're doing, it's about how deeply you're willing to be present with another person. Being that close, holding that gaze, refusing to look away, and letting yourself be fully seen is one of the most vulnerable and powerful experiences you can create. And it's in that space that intensity becomes something unforgettable. When you think about the balance of rhythm and control, you start to realize that it's never about speed or intensity alone. It's about the way both elements blend to create a flow that keeps two people connected. Rhythm is what keeps the moment alive, and control is what gives it direction. And when those two come together, the experience becomes something greater than either one alone. Too much rhythm without control feels chaotic. Too much control without rhythm feels mechanical. But when both are in harmony, it creates a natural wave that builds and releases in a way that feels effortless. That's why certain positions feel more powerful than others, because they allow you to either guide the rhythm or give it up. And in that shift, the energy changes completely. Control is about more than leading. It's about presence, about taking responsibility for the flow of the moment and making sure the other person feels secure enough to let go. When control is expressed with confidence, it allows rhythm to unfold naturally, because one person can focus entirely on surrendering while the other ensures the experience stays steady. That's what creates trust, because rhythm without that sense of direction can leave someone feeling ungrounded. But when there's control guiding it, rhythm becomes a safe place to let go. It's not about one person taking everything. It's about creating a partnership where one sets the frame and the other fills it. Rhythm, on the other hand, is what brings emotion and unpredictability into the moment. It's the variation of pace, the pauses, the accelerations, the slowdowns that make the entire experience feel alive. If rhythm never changes, it dulls the senses, but when rhythm shifts, it sparks curiosity, and curiosity keeps the body and mind fully engaged. That's why rhythm feels like the heartbeat of intimacy, because it's not constant, it changes, it adapts, it surprises, and every shift keeps the moment from ever becoming stale. Rhythm is what makes the experience feel like a journey instead of just a task. The beauty is when control and rhythm play off each other, because one person might set the pace but allow the rhythm to break and rebuild in ways that create tension. That tension and release is what makes people lose themselves, because it mirrors the natural rhythm of life itself. There are moments of push, moments of pull, moments of holding back, and moments of giving everything, and that cycle creates an emotional depth that's impossible to ignore. When rhythm is left unchecked, it loses meaning, but when it's paired with intentional control, every shift feels purposeful and every beat carries weight. Another layer of this balance is the psychological effect it has on the mind. When someone feels control, they can relax and focus on the sensations instead of worrying about what happens next. When rhythm is unpredictable, they feel excitement, anticipation, and intensity that keeps them locked into the moment. That combination creates a dual experience of safety and thrill, which is exactly why it feels so powerful. People want to feel secure enough to let go, but they also want to feel surprised enough to stay on edge, and rhythm balanced with control is what makes both possible at the same time. This balance also shows that intimacy isn't just physical, it's musical. It's almost like a dance, where the timing, the pauses, and the energy all matter as much as the movement itself. In a dance, if both partners try to lead, the flow collapses. But if one leads while the other follows, the rhythm becomes effortless and beautiful. The same is true here, where control gives structure and rhythm gives soul, and together they create something far more powerful than either alone. That's why some moments stick in memory forever, because they carry both precision and spontaneity, and that mix is what makes it unforgettable. The real strength of rhythm and control is that they teach presence, because you cannot master them if you're distracted or disconnected. You have to pay attention. You have to feel the other person's response. You have to know when to push and when to pause, and that kind of awareness deepens the connection beyond anything physical. Rhythm gives life, control gives direction, and the two together make sure that no moment feels wasted. Every second carries meaning, and the experience becomes one that cannot be repeated in exactly the same way again, which is what makes it so rare and so powerful. When you think about making it about connection and not just technique, you realize that the difference between something forgettable and something unforgettable has nothing to do with skill and everything to do with presence. Technique can be learned, it can be copied, it can be practiced, but connection is unique because it requires full attention and full authenticity. You can do everything right on the surface and still have the moment fall flat if you're not truly engaged, because people don't just want performance, they want presence. That presence is what makes someone feel valued, noticed, and important, and without it, even the most practiced movements feel empty. Connection takes the ordinary and turns it into something that feels alive, and that's what leaves a mark long after it's over. The truth is, technique without connection often feels mechanical, like going through a routine without any real energy behind it. People can sense when you're there in body, but not in mind, and it creates a barrier that no amount of skill can overcome. Connection means listening, noticing, adapting, and being willing to give more than just effort. It means giving attention and emotion. That's why the most powerful moments are not the ones that look perfect, but the ones that feel genuine, because emotion beats performance every single time. When the focus shifts from impressing to connecting, the entire energy changes, and what happens in that space. Connection also builds trust, and trust is the foundation of every powerful experience. When someone feels connected, they're willing to be vulnerable. They're willing to let go of fear, and they're willing to fully embrace the moment. That's something technique alone can never do, because technique might create movement, but connection creates safety. Safety isn't boring. Safety is what allows someone to step outside of their own guard and let themselves feel more fully. When trust and safety exist, the body responds differently, the mind relaxes, and the intensity rises without forcing it, because the emotional foundation is solid. Making it about connection also means paying attention to the little things, the unspoken signals, the changes in rhythm, the way someone breathes or reacts. Those details matter more than any single technique, because they show awareness, and awareness communicates care. Connection is really about saying, I see you, I hear you, I'm fully here with you right now, and that level of presence makes the experience feel one of a kind. When both people feel seen, the moment doesn't just pass. It expands, it deepens, it becomes something layered with meaning that no amount of surface level performance could ever recreate. Another part of connection is slowing down enough to actually feel. Technique often pushes people to think about doing more, adding more, showing more, but connection is about depth, not volume. It's about being willing to hold still, to stay close, to linger in a glance or a touch long enough for it to mean something. That stillness builds anticipation, it builds emotion, and it creates a memory that feels fuller than anything rushed or forced. Connection thrives in patience, and patience is often the hardest thing to give because it requires vulnerability and presence, but it's also what creates the strongest intensity. The most powerful experiences are the ones that are not just done, but felt, and that's what connection ensures. When you're connected, every move has weight, every sound has meaning, every shift feels intentional, and nothing gets wasted. That's what makes people remember, because it doesn't feel like something that could happen with anyone. It feels like something that only happens in this exact space with this exact person. That uniqueness is what technique alone can never provide, because technique can be repeated, but connection cannot be duplicated. The strength of this keynote is that it reminds you the real difference maker isn't how much you know or how skilled you are. It's how willing you are to be fully present in the moment. Connection means letting go of trying to be perfect and instead focusing on being real, because real is what people remember. Real is what makes someone feel cared for, noticed, and understood. And that feeling lasts far longer than any flawless performance ever could. Connection is what transforms something ordinary into something unforgettable. and it's the one element that can never be replaced by technique.